Did you get it?
Yeah, I'm not doing that again.
It's trying. It'll get there eventually.
That needs a short
Maybe.
He's up for that.
I may just watch off of yours because it's not coming.
Welcome to the Centerville City Council meeting of July 2nd, 2019 at 7 p.m. held at Centerville City Community Center and City Council Chambers. Council is now in session. Let's start by doing a roll call, starting to my far left.
Meekum, present.
McEwen, present.
Ivy present.
Note that 3 of 5 council members are present. Councilwoman Fillmore is being excused for family reasons down in California, and I think Councilman Ince is probably on his way. But we do have a quorum. Although the next item of business is the prayer of thought.
Oh, here he is.
Oh, it's okay.
How are you praying on the fly?
You're just in time for your part, then you can leave again.
I wasn't planning to leave.
I know. Thank you. Welcome, Council Member Entz. Note that Council Member Entz is present as well, too. We were just turning to you, Council Member, for a prayer thought that you may have for tonight's meeting.
I think I'm just going to go to prayer.
Okay.
Our Father which art in heaven, we bow our heads at the beginning of this city council meeting and give thee thanks for thy presence in our lives and in our community, for the good people who are around us who step up and do what is right, for first responders who place their lives and safety on the line, that we as a community may be more safe. We are also thankful for the beautiful environment in which we find ourselves. We pray that thy Spirit might be present in this meeting, that we might make good decisions, and we will be considerate of all around us. We pray for our community during this 4th of July celebration, which will occur on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday, that all will go well, that all might be safe, and that it will be a special time for those who are in the community and those who choose to join us. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. If you'd all rise with me to say the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're going to have many opportunities in the next 3 or 4 days to take advantage of honoring our freedoms and saying pledges of allegiance and singing, and I hope that we all realize the freedoms that we have and what a choice time of year it is. It's the open session part of council meeting now. This is a chance for anybody that from the public to come up to either of these mics and express anything that may be on their mind. Try and limit your comments to 2 minutes. So I will open that open session at this time. I felt the councilman almost move and go over to the pulpit there for a second.
Yeah.
So if no one's coming up, then we will close the open session and we will proceed to the business of the meeting. We're fortunate to have with us a new city recorder, and she started training last week and has been with us at that time. And we would like to swear in Leo Romero now as our city recorder, and I believe Mackenzie Wood is going to do that for us as our city recorder.
Yay.
I thought it was just a little torch that got passed with that.
Welcome, Leah. Did you didn't bring the treats? When this morning you're supposed to bring the treats. Thank you. We're excited to work with you. Item number 2 on our business agenda is we're lucky to have a Utah Transit Authority here tonight, and they're going to tell us about some of the things that's taking place with UTA and things that specifically affect Centerville as well too. And so we're excited to have Beth Holbrook come up, and maybe Beth, you can introduce yourself a bit more and just take it away. Tell us what we need to know.
Just over here, right?
Either one, either side.
Well, thank you, Mayor, for the opportunity today to just kind of present before the council just a little bit of background of who I am and kind of what some of the projects are going on at UTA. I'm Beth Holbrook, and I am a result of the new governance structure that was enacted, Senate Bill 136. I represent Davis, Weber, and Box Elder counties, and we're part of a 3-member governance model. It's kind of similar to a commission, but we are considered trustees. So I have 2 other colleagues. One is Carlton Christensen. He represents Salt Lake. And Kent Millington represents Utah County and Tooele County. And I'm here today to this is kind of a preliminary thing in the sense that this is the first time I've had an opportunity to be before you. So I wanted to say, if you have questions, please feel free to ask them. We want to make sure that we're getting as much information to everyone as we possibly can. We have 82 cities that we service along our region, and that is 6 counties, except we do a little bit into Park City, so it's kind of 7, but mostly 6. And what we're looking to do, obviously, is to make sure that we are improving and enhancing the services that we have and talking about the things in the future that we will be doing. If you want to go ahead and scroll to the next one. Thank you so much. So this is actually a model of, as you can see, the map of the current routes that are serviced by bus that come through Centerville every day. The majority of them, and it's on the next page, just when we get there, we'll get there. The majority of them are from the 470, as you can see the ridership numbers on those. And the 470 actually originates in Ogden City and ends up in Salt Lake. And the 455 is another one that goes along our corridors, goes through each major city that's along Highway 89 and out through the community, and ends up in downtown Salt Lake. The primary thing that we want to make sure that we're doing is we want to determine if we are doing the best service. So now picture this, as you can kind of see from this map, it's kind of like a big, long, skinny corridor, right? And it goes north and south is the primary, but obviously there's some east and west in there as well. And so what we've undertaken to do is we are doing a service choices analysis. And that service choices is on buses, and it talks about the fact that what's the primary purpose of having bus service? Is it ridership or is it coverage? So ridership is probably pretty straightforward. You're going to be on Highway 89, you're going to be on Orchard Drive, you're going to be on Main Street. Those have higher densities and typically have more riders. So that's obviously the goal in that perspective. And coverage is should we pick up Mrs. Jones, who is maybe not along a more primary transportation corridor, but still pays into the system and still, would maybe require service, perhaps. Maybe there's some ADA, needs there or something along those lines. And that service choices is actually being analyzed right now. We anticipate that after taking a look at our entire system, not only as it looks regionally, but as it looks north and south, where are people going, but then also what that ridership question versus coverage is. And we'll be implementing some of that within the next year. Every year we have, thank you for changing that, I appreciate that. Every year in August, we have what we call our August change days. And that's any routes that need modification, whether there's a new population center in the city or there's something else that would require us to maybe tweak it so that we can maximize those ridership coverage balances. And this year, August 2019, we do anticipate that there will be some changes, but in Centerville there will not be any significant changes whatsoever. So service will continue the way that it is. And by the way, this is just the bus route numbers, the number of riders, and then the times that they operate. And you're welcome to share this with your community in any way that would work best for everyone.
Before you go on, let me ask you just one question.
Yes.
These ridership numbers, is there a watermark where they say a route is not viable? Because you talked about the coverage. Some of these are really low when you look at them in comparison.
So we don't have what you called a kind of like that watermark where suddenly it doesn't become viable as clearly like if you reach only 10 riders or something. We don't have it quite like that because we have to look at the entire scope of where that bus goes and not just in one particular location. So in one particular location it can be really poor in terms of actually getting people onto that, but it could be going from one destination to another. So we try to take that into account. But that said, it's a great question because there are things that structurally change within cities that are along these routes that could change that. And we do make modifications. Excuse me. When we did our 2015 Frontrunner, when Frontrunner was fully completed in that project, there were some routes that were changed as a result of that. And that is probably kind of to your point about did we get that maximum number? So there's not like a defined number per se, but great question.
Thank you.
Yeah. The next. I'm going to talk a little bit about Frontrunner, but again, feel free to ask me any questions at any time. Right now, Frontrunner is, it's 90 miles between Ogden City and Provo. And it currently runs 30 minutes at peak hours. So every 30 minutes a train comes into one of our stations, and then 1 hour on off-peak. And so that off-peak ends at like 10:30 in the morning, and then it goes back into effect about 3 o'clock in the afternoons. That is actually, I know it seems like it's pretty impressive. I think it's pretty impressive. It is actually already at peak during those rush hour times. Now you can get on the train, say right now, where it's 7:15, and you won't see, peak people standing or anything like that, but you will in the mornings, and you will in the rush hour times. And what we've looked at doing is how can we increase service and also increase the accessibility of buses going to and from our transit stops. And what we've done is actually a series of analysis that we're not fully completed on yet, but we've done the first phases of that, and that is basically studying what would give us the ability to increase the number of times that we can service, so we can get into each station. We call them headways, just so you know. And I unfortunately have a tendency to start talking acronyms, so please stop me if that happens. The headways are going to kind of be every 30 minutes, and yeah, if you want to go ahead and change, that would be great. This basically is talking about different scenarios. And so as you guys know, we are currently at maximum capacity. We're not building any new projects. We don't have capital funding. But what we're looking at is what can we do strategically down the road, because we obviously have to make sure that we're planning for growth, because I would say that in several of the people that I've talked to within even Utah, the state government, it is quite a surprise from 2005 to today to say that the level of growth that we've had is where we were at. No one quite anticipated that, and you'll see a lot of studies that go, oh, by 2050 we should only be at this, but that's not obviously what happened. And so what we're looking at doing is what would be strategic and what would get us to the next level, given that we have geography constraints and we have growth constraints that are both natural and artificially designed. We looked at multiple scenarios. As you can see up there, we looked at what can we do for a minimum investment, what can we do for a medium investment, and what can we do for full-on bring out the dollar signs because this is going to be a big one type of an investment. There's a lot of ways to look at this, and there's not any one right or wrong way, but we do need to be taking a look at this. And so the ideal model, and we can work our way back, is to figure out a strategy that can allow us to electrify and double track our current system. So the electrification will help with a couple of different things. You might have heard this term called PTC, which is this positive train control. And what that does is it's basically a federally designed software program that automatically slows a train based on a grade crossing that's coming up, and or something else significant that makes a change on that track that's going to be impactful. It will stop, slow, or anything in all of the above if it senses that there is something wrong. And it is actually a safety mechanism, which is great because safety is obviously a primary concern for us anytime we're out on a train, certainly. But what it also does is it slows down our times that we can get from one station to the next. So in an ideal world, if we electrify that, then that allows us to have greater starts and stops. So in other words, it can get up to speed faster and slow down faster as an electrified vehicle versus a diesel engine, which is what they are currently today. We are actually rebuilding all of our diesel engines to be Tier 2 plus, and that won't be complete until 2026, I believe. We're taking about 2 a year, getting them rebuilt to a better exhaust system, and then putting them back into service. The double tracking will allow us to be more nimble, if you will, because then we don't have to worry about pulling over for a train to pass. I'm sure if you guys have seen a train just stopped and it's not a station, that's what that is they're waiting for a train to pass to keep the schedule going. And electrification and double tracking will allow us to simply be more nimble, and we can just stop and take it to every 15 minutes, which can really have a huge impact moving forward. Obviously, we have growth, and we have housing, and we have very different needs that really we want to be able to help address in an infrastructure sort of way. So next slide, thank you. This is just, this is talking about, I talked ahead of myself, sorry about that. This is talking about the 30-minute peak headways versus the 15-minute peak headways. And that's basically, like I said, this is how can we manage the system and to make it move forward. Next slide, please. One of the things that we have worked out with UDOT is UDOT has done studies about transit and about obviously their own system, I-15 being one of them. And on I-15, you can only have so much capacity before you then run into a scenario where you're actually cutting off accessibility to either jobs, housing, or some facet of all of that. In an ideal world, I guess it would be great if we never had to have a freeway that's full of vehicles, but we can't actually build for that. Mostly because we have, again, limited geography, and we don't have the ability to take out the infrastructure that we're putting in today and then go around and take it out in 20 years because we wanted to create another lane. What this is in particular is talking about is what's funded for that and what's not funded for that, and what one additional lane versus two. And you can see at the top of that, there's only a maximum number of vehicles per any additional lanes, and it's about 2,000 an hour. And after that, it just doesn't become cost effective, because if you're taking out, say if you were in Lehigh, which is a bottleneck for us, or if you were in Ogden and you were taking out apartment buildings, or you were taking out a huge business, is that really the most cost effective way to do that? So, okay, next slide. And that is it. Sorry, I thought there was one more, but I apologize. It's because I actually brought the person who's going to talk about the next part of that. This is right here really quick is our rideuta.com/services choices. And that's so you can get any more information about our ridership versus coverage. And I wanted to introduce Hal Johnson. He is actually one of the planners at UTA, and he's been doing this for a while. And he is actually going to talk to you guys about how we're doing I'm going to call it this, the Davis-Salt Lake connector, which is our bus rapid transit. So I'll just go ahead and have him come up really quick. Does anyone have any questions? Okay.
Well, I have one, but maybe either one of you can answer. You talk about these investment scenarios. low, medium, high, is there even a bucket that says how many dollars? Are we talking like 2.2 billion, 100 million? What's the difference in range between these?
That's a good question. And the difference in range is quite significant. If you were talking electrification and double tracking of the entire route that exists right now, it would probably be in the $3 billion range.
I wasn't even close. Okay.
Give or take, but there's also ways to look at that. That's if you were to fully fund it and have all these electrified cars on there as well. But we can transition it. And one of the things that we talk about is how do you transition. So I talked about our locomotives getting retooled, new engines. Those can actually run on our existing system until their lifespan is complete. So that's a way to transition some of those costs. So it's like, if you were to write a check today, that's one thing, but if you were to try to transition it within, that's another. And that's where there's funding differences can be so dramatic. That and right-of-way make it a little bit challenging to determine what the costs of land would be in the future. So, but it's a great question.
I had a question too.
Yes.
So recently had a daughter return from LDS mission, and she went straight down to BYU, much to my chagrin. But just kidding.
We won't hold that against her.
That's a great place to go to school. I'm just an Aggie and a Ute. And I hear that students can ride Front Runner free. Is that correct?
Oh, great question. And kind of in answer to that question. So I'll just talk about this a little bit. Our University of Utah, BYU, UVU, and Weber State, we have contracts with them, with each of those educational institutions, to allow their students to ride the system. So it's not for, it doesn't mean if you're in high school per se that you would do that, so I just want to make a clarification about that. But if I can kind of guess as to where you're kind of going with that, one of the things that we have new down in the UVU, BYU neck of the woods, which is so awesome, by the way, is we have a bus rapid transit called UVX. And that was actually, it hasn't even been a year yet. We had our first official utilization of that new bus system August of 2018, right in time with the school years for both of those, the school year for both of those institutions. And it basically is designed so that all they have to do is get on the UVX and then go anywhere in the system. And that includes Front Runner, and it includes, just for your information, we do have people that actually go to those schools that do actually come up to the U, just so you know. They're not all just down in BYU and UVU, which makes me happy, but there you go. And they can access that in any way they need to. If they were downtown and they wanted to go onto tracks, for instance, or they needed another bus, they wanted to go to the airport, their student ID, as long as they are, following the obligations of that individual school, they have complete access to our system. And one of the unique characteristics of the UVX, which is what we call our BRT down there, is that it is free for the first couple of years to get students as well as the community accustomed to doing that. This is the first opportunity for Utah County to have any significant investment other than Front Runner, which stops in like 4 cities, I believe. So it's a great question. And yes, those students in those institutions have access to the full system, but not high school.
And a follow-up to that, I know to make traffic congestion easier in many situations, for example, I know that if you're going to like a University of Utah football game and you have a ticket, you can ride tracks free. What other situations do we have so we can get that out to people where people can ride transit for free? Maybe to BYU games it's that way. I mean, is it that way to
It is.
cultural events, anything like that? Can you think of any other situations?
So if it's a destination that it originates or that it ends either at BYU or Utah or University of Utah, then yes, that is also included, but that is sometimes, it's a negotiated thing. So for instance, if there were a significant, like a graduation, let's say, so not a game, a football game or something. If there were like a graduation, then what happens is that organization contacts us and says, hey, we're going to need, a certain amount of more hours or something else that's going to impact that. And then yes, that is considered either it's part of their cost, or we structure it in a way that it makes it not too expensive to do something like that. It's just going to depend on how that contract is with that organization. But typically, we try to make sure that we are helping, whether it's a graduation, whether it's a concert, some of those other events that can help to mitigate traffic issues that we all know and experience. So I hope that that helps. But yes to BYU. So if you are going to BYU games in the fall, or the University of Utah, your ticket to that game is a pass onto transit. And you can originate in anywhere in the organization and go to that destination. So, great question. And I know you had one as well.
I have heard some things over time about parking safety at stations. What are you doing to address that?
So we actually have our own police department within Utah Transit Authority. And part of their role is to make sure that they are addressing the needs of those parking lots, which includes security. We have also increased the number of cameras that are in all of our trains, all of our buses, so that we can hopefully mitigate problems before they become more significant. But park and ride areas are definitely part of that, and we do have increased cameras in those areas as well. And we also have a system that you can text to. So if you're feeling uncomfortable but somebody is right in your face or very close, you can actually text to, it's 801-287-EYES, E-Y-E-S, and just describe where you're at, and that's it. And no one knows what you've done, but you're communicating directly with the UTA police.
Except for the person that's confronting you.
Yeah, if they're right in your face, then that's one thing. But if you're witnessing something else and you see anything suspicious, we always tell people, I mean, we have a lot of signs in all of our systems that say, utilize this, text us, let us know. Because if we don't know that it's happening, we can't address it. And we really want to make sure that not only safety for the other passengers, but safety for our operators as well is kind of our key focus. And we want to make sure that everyone is feeling comfortable riding our systems. So, but it's a great question because it is an ongoing, you have to constantly be looking at these types of things and utilizing technology or utilizing other methods in order to make sure that the system itself is safe and the park and ride lots are safe as well. So, great question.
You talk about some of these deals for students, for the games. Are there programs for the lower income portion of the community that really needs assistance to get free or subsidized travel? Because it's, I don't use it a lot, but it's not cheap.
Right.
And so are there things for people who are low income?
So we do have plans. We have several past programs that are actually subsidized by other organizations like DWS or homeless shelters, or in the case of Utah County, we're actually doing a pilot for individuals recently released from jail or prison. Because obviously, matriculation back into the community is kind of one of those key things. And we do have several programs. They're administered by a third party typically. And so if we're contracting with, we do, let's see. So we also do the aging, Salt Lake County Aging, Davis County Aging, all of these government entities that are taking care of those needs. We do contract with them and try to work out arrangements based on what the numbers that they are seeing and the number of utilized people that would need to utilize it. So we do have programs. I apologize I can't articulate it, but I can send you information of the very specifically if you would like that. I'm happy to do that as well. I'll make myself a note.
So this may be a stupid question.
No such thing as that.
But what is UTA's purpose more help to reduce traffic and clean up the air? Help to reduce traffic so we don't have to widen the freeway 2 more lanes? Or is it speed? Because you talk about speed, and yet my assistant who lives in Layton if she tries to take UTA into Salt Lake and get to work, unfortunately, you're talking 2-hour transit. By the time she gets from her house over to a station, you've got to provide yourself a little bit of grace time to get there, takes the train in, and then has to get from the station to the other side of the downtown area. It's a 2-hour transit. So at the end of the day, you're looking at 4 hours, and you add that on to an 8-hour day.
It can be a bit
It's-
challenging. We look at things, and those are great questions. We do look at things we call it the first and last mile. You guys will probably have noticed that there's a lot of electric bikes and scooters around transit stops. That's actually been one of the things that, you never know how technology is going to impact things. And we have found that that is actually impactful on a pretty positive note. Because basically what it does is it allows somebody to utilize transit and then to take a scooter or a bike and get to that final destination. But in addition to that, we also we're doing a pilot program in Southwest Salt Lake County in the fall called microtransit. And microtransit is, think of it as like Uber, but for transit. So it's an app-based program which is designed to get you, it's not going to be full-on Uber where they're literally door to door. But what it was designed to do is to kind of get you within a half a block of where you are originating, and hopefully it can get you anywhere within that community. So think if you are an elderly person who needs to go to the doctor, think that type of thing. They can get you super close within a half a block of those, or they can get you to a transit stop of some kind. And they are designed to be reactive in a way that I think is unique in the sense that you get, 10 or 15 people who say, I'm in this area and I need to go to this area. And so what that is designed to do is designed to pick them up within this specific area and drop them off. And it will get as close as it can and either drop them to a transit or drop them as close as they can to their final destination. And like I said, it's app-based, but we do still, because we're a federal agency or we get federal funding, we have to comply with federal standards, and that means we have to have ADA compliant vehicles. So obviously Uber is not ADA compliant. And we also have to make sure that we are allowing full access, which means you could still call, but it's designed to be a little more responsive, I think is the better word to use that. But you do bring up a great point in the sense that the way that the system is right now, it is at max capacity during peak hours. And our buses as well some of them are express buses. The majority of our buses are actually designed to stop at various stops. So it's not the fastest, but it is efficient in the sense that it's getting you to your final destination. So we take a look at all of these things and try to maximize where we think that we can and, make changes where we feel it's going to be beneficial. So, and it's a multi-pronged effort, and we're trying to be as responsive as we can. So I think that was a great question. Hope that helped.
And by the way, I know this isn't involved with you, but the bike and scooter thing is real. Not only is it a fun date, my wife and I did it about 3 weeks ago in Salt Lake for about 2 hours, but when I was in DC a month ago, you cannot find those bike stations, any bikes in there at 5 o'clock in DC because people have jumped on them leaving to take them to another station to catch the metro out. I mean, it's, and you get them by the station and it's quick access to where you need to go. I mean, it's a real part of our transportation system, and you're seeing that used that way in bigger cities all throughout America.
That is definitely true. Ogden City just did a partnership with Lime Scooter about 2 months ago, something along those lines. And they're already seeing a lot of momentum in Ogden. Provo just barely, I think, inked their deal. And I can't remember who it wasn't Lime, but it was another scooter company. And they are already kind of seeing, people are excited about that type of a thing because it's basically filling this little first and last mile gap that transit has. By definition, we do have buses, and buses can go to certain areas, but we have to be somewhat time efficient on a bus. So we can't go to every area. And certainly we can't move tracks and trains. They are fixed. And so this is really allowing us to be nimble and to be a little more responsive when we're talking about moving people. You asked, actually, Councilman Ince, you asked about what is UTA's role. And that is actually defined by the communities that we service. Some communities want us to focus on different elements, whether it's air quality, whether it's transportation, moving the maximum amount of people, whether it is, how can we navigate our geography and address growth? And can we implement things along our transit lines that incorporate housing or some other component that could make it a little bit more affordable? Because if you don't have to have one vehicle and you're typically a 2-vehicle family, maybe that will make a difference in your income. We are kind of all of those things, and we're really trying to incorporate what we have and hopefully we can address some of those needs in the future. So, great questions. And I'm going to turn it over to...
I just have one
yes,
quick
you have
comment.
one. Yes,
and
go for it, Robin.
I have had people frustrated with the fact that there's no Sunday trains.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and now, like the mayor's saying, your kids could come home from BYU, but they can't get back down there Sunday night. I'm just wondering if, or want to put in the word that there's a lot of people that would, even if they could just have one early morning and one late night, but so there was a way on Sunday to get back to where you came from, a lot of people would maybe be able to use that.
And thank you. And we do get that question a lot. And we, part of our study on the future of Frontrunner does incorporate Sunday service, because that would be the next level aside from having 15-minute headways, because that really makes it much more nimble. And if you look at our UVX has really shown that people love the speed, they love to be able, so just really quick, a bus rapid transit actually has its own lane, and it has the ability to connect with the signals so that UDOT supplies obviously your red, green lights, and it can stay green to get that bus through, which makes it faster and more efficient. And we have really seen a lot of growth as a result of that. The reason we don't have Sunday service right now is we are at our maximum capacity number of locomotives. So anything else would be a capital investment, and we would take a look at that, but then we look at that and we say, what can we do to be strategic about purchasing something along those lines? Is it better to continue to buy a diesel locomotive, or do we look at the electrification, because it kind of, that's, how do you spend that money, right? And Sunday service would be, I think, the next level that we would want to see that happen. Right now, what we do on Sundays is we're required federally to inspect every portion of our track every week, so that we know where there's potential for, is there something wearing, is there some other component that needs to be addressed, and that's what we save our Sundays for. So even though we don't operate them, we are definitely working on Sundays. So, but it's a great question, and we do get that a lot, and we do look at that as well. So.
You're going to have to find another way to send them home. You can't say you're going to miss your train.
Yes, that's right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Hal, and he's going to talk about a bus rapid transit that we're looking at in this area in South Davis. So.
Sorry to make you stand so long, Hal.
Oh, no worries.
But they're all great questions. I
Yeah,
thought.
you guys have some great questions. It's really nice to be out with you tonight. Just as Beth mentioned, we've got the UVX system that just opened last year. It's been a great project for us. We've got a few other bus rapid transit projects we've been looking at. So we've been working on a project up in Ogden to link the Frontrunner station up to Weber State and McCady Hospital. And then Wasatch Front Regional Council, they're our metropolitan planning organization for this area. They produced a long-range transportation plan. The transportation plan identified the need to make an investment in Southern Davis County transit. We have Frontrunner, that's a great system, but what the plan identified is the need for more of an east side service that would build on the successful 455 and 470 routes we have. And so we're looking at a bus rapid transit system that would connect from the Woods Cross Station to downtown Salt Lake and potentially up to the University of Utah. So we're just kicking off an environmental study for that project. Long-range plan it also identifies a future investments north of the Woods Cross Station, connecting up from Farmington down through Centerville and to the Woods Cross Station. So that's been identified as a second phase, if you will. And so we're just kicking off the environmental study, as well as we'll do conceptual engineering and cost estimate for potential investment in Southern Davis County. We've invited Mayor Wilkinson to join us with our policy committee for the Salt Lake Davis Connector, recognizing that we've got a future extension investment that's been identified in the plan. So we're excited to kind of get that move forward in the process, and we want to have Centerville participate, and so we can kind of talk about next steps in the future after the first phase of the project. And
August 7th, 12:30 I have. Is that right? Sound right?
Yeah,
Okay.
and we're doing lunch as well, so.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions?
Well, on behalf of Utah Transit Authority and my close association with Centerville from my previous roles, I just want to say thank you so much for the opportunity to be here tonight. And if anyone ever has any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm going to give you my cards so that you've got all my contact information. And good, bad, whatever, we want to make sure that we're hearing from all the people that we service. So please let us know if there's anything else you need. So thank you.
Thank you.
Beth, Hal, thank you. Very informative, very good. Thank you for all the questions from council as well, too. And we'll have their information to get a hold of them at any time, it sounds like. Let's move then to item number 3 on our business agenda. This is a summary action calendar. There's 2 items on the summary action calendar. End of the warranty period for the C. John subdivision, the street overlay projects 2019 bid award. Do we have any questions on the summary action calendar? If not, then I'd entertain a motion for approval.
I would make a motion that we approve the 2 items on the summary action calendar as summarized.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, we'll do a roll call vote starting to my far left.
Aye.
Go.
I don't know which way you wanted to go.
Go to the left to the right.
Left to the right, okay.
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 4-0. Was there anybody here to talk about those? Were you just here if we had questions, like specifically Mark? Is that what you were here for? Okay, thanks for being here. We appreciate you coming.
Mark, I feel inclined to ask you a question, just so, no, just kidding.
It adds to our numbers too, makes us not feel as lonely, Mark. So thank you for all you do, and thanks for being here if we did have questions. But that's why things get on summary action. Sometimes we will and sometimes we won't, but we appreciate you showing up. Okay, item number 4. This is a public hearing item. This is a zoning text amendment setbacks for accessory buildings in residential zones. And we have Corey Snyder here to discuss that. Welcome, Corey.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. As indicated previously, the council directed the Planning Commission staff to take a look at the accessory building setbacks. Just by way of summary, for those in the audience, there was kind of the 3 bears model, the little bear, the medium bear, and the big bear. And so we had different gradation of sizes to the buildings. If it was a small, tough shed type, it was a lesser setback. Medium-sized building that wasn't 2 stories had a different setback. And then if you did a large building or a tall one or 2-story, it had the most aggressive setback. And the council directed staff and the commission to look at maybe softening those. You had some specifics. I listed those to the Planning Commission in the report of what we thought we heard from the council. But I'm bringing up the ordinance because, as usual, when you run it through committee, there's lots of turns and twists. And so I'm just going to jump right to the turns and the twists and what the Planning Commission recommended in the end to the council. The first turn and twist is the large bear category. This was the two-story or something that exceeded 10 feet in height. The council wanted to bump that up from 10 to 14, as I understood. But you had that large building setback. That large building setback matched the same setback of the home, which would have been 8 feet. That was eliminated in simplistic. So the commission is recommending the elimination of that 8-foot setback. They also went to the small and the medium buildings and they adjusted it. And here's where the twist occurs. Right now, and in theory under the building code, the demarcation of getting a building permit and not getting a building permit is at something less than 200 square feet. So think of your tough shed. Although you may have to comply with certain codes still in zoning, it's exempted from a city review to be less than 200. And so that was the original demarcation of when you had to come into the city and when you submitted plans for verification. The tough sheds were on your honor basis, for lack of better terms. The Planning Commission is adjusting that, and they're adjusting that to 400 square feet, which created an interesting dynamic. Now you have a difference between a building code and a zoning code that's not equalized. That equalization still sits at the 200 square feet for the building code, regardless of what we might do in the zoning code. 200 square feet becomes a permit-regulated structure. That permit-regulated structure has a couple of parameters to it as an accessory building. Regardless of zoning, the building code looks at a safety factor. That safety factor is anything that encroaches less than 5 feet to the property line has to have a 1-hour firewall. So regardless of our setback, whether we chose 2, whether we chose 3, whether we chose 4 feet, if anybody wants to take a building 200 square feet or larger, the building code will kick in a fire code requirement. What they're trying to do is create a 10-foot separation between adjoining buildings. So if you have 5 feet on one side, you have 5 feet on the other, you meet the fire code, no firewall. You want to drop below less than 5 feet, and potentially your neighbor drops below 5 feet, both of you have to do a fire-rated wall. And that's where the Planning Commission entered the twist. We talked about the options for people to make choices. And so they went with the, let's discuss the small one, the 3-foot setback. They're adjusting it that if you want to build a building that's 400 square feet or larger, you have the option. You have the option to go to 3 feet, and you'll end up having to do the firewall by default. If you want to get out of the firewall, then by default you'll go to the 5 feet. So that small building is where they're introducing the choice of the property owner to make their own choice to decide what setback, given the construction codes. So you'll see a footnote at the bottom that was added. Be aware, the zoning code might be different than the building code. Just because you can do something in the zoning code doesn't mean you're exempted from the construction codes. So that's why the 5 foot is added to the note parameter. Then in taking away the 8-foot setback, they also used the 400 square foot demarker now and said that will meet the fire code. That will meet the safety code automatically. You don't get an option. And that's for lack of better terms, kind of I wouldn't call it a balance because that's probably not a correct term, but that was the discussion between this 8-foot setback and this 5-foot setback. If it's a larger building, 400 square feet or more, we'll make you go back to the 5 feet because it's a larger building. And by the way, that gets you out of the fire code separation, so there's your advantage. Their discussion partly centered around the need to go to the 8-foot. And there was some, I wouldn't say it's all, it didn't become clear to me, a majority feeling, But some of the discussion centered around, if my house can be 35 feet, why am I putting an accessory building that's limited at 20 feet at the 8-foot setback also? Isn't the 5-foot sufficient distance? And so ultimately, that's our recommendation, is bottom part of your ordinance. And if you have questions or I made it muddy, let me know.
Any questions for Corey this time? Okay.
So we can see what the planning commission did. If there's one of these provisions that's automatic, and I feel like my neighbor is pushing it too much, then what?
Define automatic and where we're pushing.
Below the
The
four.
choice, yeah, they want to do a building, but they want to go to 3 foot, and you, as a neighbor, don't want it at 3 foot,
Yeah,
as an example.
they're 425 feet, not 400, and they say it's less than 400.
Oh, if the person is, well, out above 200, they have to submit a plan, so we'll know. We'll know whether they,
Okay, so it's automatic, but they still have to submit it.
yes, anything over 200 square feet will always trigger a permit. Now, they got to be careful in the dark of the night.
You mean when the Home Depot contractor shows up and puts it up in the afternoon and you didn't pull a building permit because you bought it from Home Depot and you thought that that was handled as part of your purchase?
Yeah, you
Okay.
do have those situations, and they get kind of frustrating between neighbors and owners because somebody, if it's significant building, if it's a tough shed, we're probably not going to get a call because 90% of the time they just put those against the fence. And although it may be wrong according to building code and zoning code, some neighbors seem to get along when it's a little tough shed. It's still wrong, but they seem to tolerate the unapproved behavior. But if it gets significant size, it'll get reported. And then it becomes the neighbors saying, how fast is this going to be fixed? The owner's like, I just paid for all of this. And the code enforcement officer or designee gets to mediate that conflict.
So if I'm building just a one-story garage in my backyard, I'm going to have to be 5 feet.
If it's
Over
400 square feet or
But you
more.
couldn't have you wouldn't have a garage less than that?
Well, I don't know what the minimum, because you've got, if you're building a garage versus a carport, you have return walls, they have minimum sizes, 400 square feet for a one-car garage is still pretty small for parking.
But so I
But
could
a
go-
two-car garage would certainly be big enough.
So if I'm going to build a two-car garage, I can go to 3 feet, but I have to build a firewall.
Well, you're not going to get a two-car garage at 400 square feet with the return wall requirements. But let's just, in theory, something close to 400 square feet, 395 square feet, can go to 3 feet if you build the firewall. The demarcation's now at 400 instead of 200.
So then what is it for my garage, my
It's 5 feet.
Any garage is going to be kicked into the 5 feet.
5 feet? Okay.
And garage is a loose term. You're actually parking a vehicle in it versus the Kubota tractor I dream about.
Thanks, Corey. There's not an applicant on this one, I don't believe, so we will go to the public hearing portion. And on the public hearing portion, this is a public hearing for this zoning text amendment. And so I will open up, and you can come up to these either of these microphones, introduce yourself and where you're from. So the public hearing on this is now open.
I'm Alan Arbuckle. I'm on Pages Lane. And I just wanted some clarification. I do want to tell you that I appreciate you doing YouTube, because I was able to go back. I missed the Planning Commission meeting, and I was able to go back and review it. and the chairs were all empty, and I felt really horrible about that because, but I got really confused because they were a little uncertain as to what 400 feet was or what 500 square feet were, how it related to garages. And I think Corey's said a little bit about that, you know, it's hard to put a car or vehicle in a 400 square foot and try to back a boat or something, an RV, into something that's small in the backyard is a little more difficult. So I'm trying to see, you know, maybe 500 square feet, because I think the council had made that remark of 500 square feet in their review of this a few weeks ago. And I'm just a little unclear about the one story and the height, and then what that entails as far as your setback. I'm okay with doing the firewall if it's 3 feet, and if you had a 500 square foot garage, a single story. In my situation, I'm here because I have an agenda, okay? And I'm sure there's others.
Appreciate the honesty.
And so the idea is, I got a boat that's got a tower, and I need a 12-foot opening to get the boat through. And to do that, you need at least a 14-foot high, and then you're going to be, but it's all single story. So when you're talking single story, to me, it's, I mean, 16 feet to be mid height, and that's not even, that's a 412 pitch. It's not a really steep pitched roof. It's just normal. And so I'm kind of pleading that we might lax the requirements on this and go, you know, 500 square foot, a little higher on the pitch of the roof, because, you know, I went back and I looked at this situation that brought this all together off of Porter Lane, and 3 feet doesn't make a heck of a difference whether it's going to block somebody's view or not. The idea is it useful, and can it make it useful? Because an 8-foot setback for me just ruined the whole garage. I could put a tough shed there because I can't make the turn to back an RV or a boat back into it, because I have the way my lot, it's a fairly narrow lot. So my suggestion is if you could kind of relax that and kind of look at what's practical and what's workable with the height standards. Obviously, 2-story, yeah, I can see making it more of a, like the house requirement, 8 foot. But you're going to have a bigger building anyway, so maybe it makes more sense. But for something for a simple single, well, I'm not even going to have a 2-car garage. It's just a wide 1-car. But I need a little height because of the towers. And RVs would be a similar type situation for somebody who's going to get an RV, a trailer, or something like that. But anyway, that's my recommendation, is to try to look at it as practical usage and what's going to work and what doesn't, because 400 square feet really doesn't work for a lot of vehicles like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
So Corey, will you get out and give us the pros and cons of what he just said?
Before we
Oh,
do,
no, I'll let you wait.
before we do that, public hearing's still going on this matter, so anyone else on the public hearing that'd like to come up?
Hi, my name's Jeff Baker, and I'm over on 501 Old Farm Circle. I agree with that. I guess the reason I struggle is our house is built, I think, in 92. Nothing's changed with our lots, and I get, you know, setbacks were 1, now they're 3, but nothing has changed with the lots. They haven't gotten smaller, but vehicles continue to get bigger, RVs, boats. So, to his point, it does make it really hard. Even the 5 feet, if we were willing to put a firewall in and keep it at the 3 feet, I think it would help a lot of people try to fit these, you know, accessory garages in. So I would ask that you guys hopefully can lax on that as well.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it. Anybody else want to come forward on this public hearing matter?
So my name's Candace Stanford, and I'm over at 1407 Suncrest Circle. And we're having the same issue when you push that setback over, making the turn, because the way that the lot is, to turn in a boat or to turn in an RV to back in, it's not possible the more that you have to set back the garage. And so then you're trying to make the driveway wider or be able to swing it out more, but then you still have that issue too, being closer to it. And so I guess I had some other questions too with that, but the setbacks, yeah, if we could do a firewall, if we're willing to do the firewall, even if it is a larger unit and still be able to move it closer, it would be super helpful. But I do understand the whole, keeping it safe in between. But if there isn't, and there won't ever be, a unit next to it or a home next to it, because it's not physically possible for our neighbors to build there, is there any way that can be transitioned or be a little more lenient in that? I think if there's some ways that we can get around, I know that's way more detail and way more looking into stuff, but there's just different situations. I think it's hard to just lay out, well, it has to all be like this, when everybody's homes and properties are all different. And like you're saying, everything's growing, everything's getting bigger. And even, I know you guys are doing one story, but we're doing a 2-story because we are doing a mother-in-law. We're not doing a mother-in-law apartment. We are not. We are not doing a mother-in-law apartment because we are not putting in the right stuff to qualify for an apartment. But it is going to be taller. But once again, we are doing the garage that has the taller door. I didn't say that. Can we delete that?
It's on YouTube.
Yeah, delete that. No, we already looked into that, and we know there's certain things we can't have in there. But so it would be 2 stories, but we also have the taller doors. And so that keeps pushing us over more and more, and then we can't even use the garage because it's set over too far. And so, yeah, I agree with that. If there's a little more leniency or a little more, like if we can apply for an amendment or something, that would be super helpful.
Thank you. You're okay, you didn't say accessory dwelling unit, so. Anybody further on the public hearing matter? If not, I will close the public hearing, and it sounds like we have some questions both from the public and from the council for Corey. Corey, do you remember what they were, or do you want us to fire
Devin,
about you?
we'll see if I addressed it, and then I'll answer for you. The first thing is you cannot believe everything you see on the internet or hear, and this is on YouTube, so I'm not sure what you can and can't believe off of YouTube.
We'll cut it back together so it sounds right.
Because when you're showing a little diagram there to the commission, you couldn't hear, so just an FYI.
On the,
Do you remember the planning commission had a little sheet of paper?
yeah, that was a work session that they're doing, and it didn't pick up very well. Yeah,
Just FYI.
yeah, it did. We tried to set up a mic, but it didn't work very well. So we're to I'm going to go back to what I remember, the height issue. This is something I think may have somewhat lost in transition in their motion. I was trying to look at it. The 1-story, I believe, was centered around the 10 feet and maintaining the 10 feet. So it wasn't an issue, because what they discussed was once you go higher, then you can go up to the applicable building code of 20 feet. So I think maybe their motion missed the 10 feet. I'd have to go back and look at it, because that's struck into the ordinance. But I think their focus was at 10 feet. And then if you want to do something, it's larger. Lisa I don't know if you remember that discussion, but the story was intended to not be 1 story at 19 and a half feet.
Well, I don't know that that's clear. I don't think 1 story is defined in our code. We've
No,
used that
it's not.
all along. This isn't a new term in our code, but it could be interpreted meaning you don't have another floor above that. I mean, I think the intent of the Planning Commission was that we wanted a small, low-profile building, and if you're under 400 square feet and you're 1 story, meaning you don't have a second floor.
Yeah, it could,
then it's
because
a
the building
smaller
code will count story from the floor elevation to the ceiling height, the drop ceiling. So it can be 9, it could be 10, it could be 12, it could be 14. and
Yeah.
still be counted as one story.
Exactly. So if you really wanted to cap it, you could put a
Yeah.
height.
But I know they had significant discussion that once you reach this greater setback, they were comfortable not pushing it to the 8 and allowing it to go to the 20-foot average height at the 5-foot rather than at the 8-foot. The flexibility of 400, 500 square feet, you're just down to deciding how big of a building. I mean, depends on who you're looking at. If you're building it, 400 square feet's not a lot of space. 500 square feet gives you 100 more square feet to get the Christmas decorations in. Now I have to deal with it. But if you're the next door neighbor, the bigger it gets, the more irritation it is. So whether that's 450, 400, I think the Planning Commission was as reflected. Where do we change it? We're convinced that 200 feet is not right. Doubling it sounds like a lot when you say, well, we're going to increase this and double it. But is it? I think it's a value judgment. Depends on your perspective of where you want to place that demarcation. So your flexibility is built in. I think the argument of too much flexibility, the 3-foot argument, I probably influenced a lot of that discussion if you go back, because I'm comfortable at 5 feet. I'm comfortable that the safety factor of the building code is a really easy draw for simplicity and liability. So pushing it to 3 feet, pushing it to 1 foot, the safety factor is now built into a problem. And so if you just done, because I think there's a disparity that I agree a little bit with the commission. If you can build your house at 8 feet, why can't you build your accessory garage at 8 feet? Yes, it seems cumbersome because it's in your backyard space to some degree, but your neighbor can do the same. And if it's in the required setback of 20 feet, you can only cover 20% of your backyard anyway. So we control the bulk of that size of that building through how much you can cover in your backyard. Because if you have more than the 20 feet, the house could have been there anyway. You're just substituting the accessory building at 20 feet for a house that can go all the way to the 20-foot setback. So that's their build area. And so for me, logically, 5 feet, safety code, distance, easy to interpret. But I only win about 45% of my arguments because there's a whole bunch of other people involved in the system.
Did that answer some questions out here?
Well, I'm really slow at this, but, so you're saying anything over?
Sorry, just for the record, as you were
We have
talking
to
about,
hold
it
on.
won't pick it up unless you're at the
Yeah,
microphone.
you gotta come up.
I know, I complained about him not talking to it, so. So I'm trying to understand, the square footage is 400 feet and larger, you can go to 3 feet or 5 feet?
Larger than 400, you're automatically at 5.
Okay, so larger than 400, you have to be 5 feet or, okay.
If you're less than 400, you're 395 or less, you get to
Okay.
choose.
Okay, and so what I think we're trying to do is convince you to go, we could go over 400 feet and have 3 to 5 feet if we have the firewall. I think that's what
That's what you're asking the council.
we're asking the council to review and look at.
And my answer to that was trying to say, this
I know.
becomes a value judgment. Preference to whose side of the fence, pun intended, you're on.
That's very good.
Okay.
Thanks for clarifying.
And then the height, we're still stuck on 10 feet? That's mid-roof line?
No, I think Lisa explained it, that because I think the planning commission was worried about things that go up to the 20-foot max, so the 10-foot might be lost in transition, but Lisa makes a good argument that maybe it was purposeful loss in transition, because if it's 1 story, it's 1 story. If somebody wants to put a loft on it, it's automatically 2-story by building code.
Right, so
1 story at 16 feet, less than 400, could go to the 3-foot with a firewall. It's just a really funky, skinny building.
right, and so that's why we need to enlarge it so it doesn't look so funky.
If the community as a whole in this value is comfortable with a larger building than 400.
Well, and I'm not here to debate anything, but I just know that previously to this, I have a neighbor had a garage at 1 foot off. And so there's a lot of disparity throughout the city that there's accessory dwellings that are 1 foot off the property line.
Buildings, because you can't believe everything on the internet.
Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, there are old codes that were 1 foot. I mean, in a commercial zone, you can go to 0 feet, but now you have a 3-hour firewall, no window penetrations, and no man doors. I mean, so, yeah, the setbacks have evolved over time. And generally perception influences pushing them back further from the 0 foot, and safety codes with issues that come up with separation start pushing that away. Water drainage off a roof, they change. So you're right, there are buildings out there that are on the 0 lot line either inappropriately or appropriately from historic past.
Councilwoman Meekum, did you get your question answered, or do you have one?
So, I'll put my question. On the garage, now if it's 400, well, people aren't going to want to go for less than 400.
Well,
I mean, are we actually changing? I don't see, and we're changing the size of the building, but I don't see us changing anything in red over on the other side. So are we changing the feet that they can be? I mean, we're saying it had to be 5, now we're saying it can be 3 with a firewall. Is that the only
No,
change?
you still had the 3 for the tough shed originally.
Right, but for bigger, okay.
Yeah, but the demarcation started being cut off at 200 and so forth. Now they're saying, we're going to be more flexible and increase it. And so less than 400, you get to decide where you want to put it, at 3 foot or 5 foot. Over 400, automatically at 5 foot.
so just because I believe in the internet, I was looking up some numbers. Just
So was I.
typical 1-car garage is saying 12 by 22, or if you want a longer vehicle, 16 by 24, typical size. And then if you're looking at a 2-car, you're looking anywhere from 20 by 20 to 24 by, or 28 by 40. I mean, you get past that 500 square feet when you get into the 2-car garage, but you can build a 1-car that you can actually open the doors under that 400 square feet, unless I'm doing my math wrong.
Yeah, it depends on your return wall and your engineering on your return wall. Because if people want a garage, it's different than carport. They have the return wall, and your return walls are 2.5 feet automatic before you get to your door. So if you're doing 8-foot door and a regular door, so you're looking at 22 feet wide, and then you got to go the depth for the single car. Because you can't have anything in a shear wall less than 2.5 feet, and it has to be hurricane strapped. If you do a carport, beam and post construction, yeah.
No, my first
You
home
can
had a
protect the
garage that if I pulled into, I couldn't open the doors because it was an accessory building ad that was pretty small, so, yeah.
Any further questions, or somebody ready to set forth a motion?
Yeah, I have a comment.
Okay.
This may be politically incorrect, but I feel like we have a tar baby. We're getting pushed and pulled 16 ways from Sunday, and I'm not sure what I think at this point.
My comment to George was just, do you think we need to table this tonight and maybe get a little more information, look at some other cities and see? I mean, yeah, I feel confused.
Corey, do you know what Bountiful and Farmington do?
I don't. It's common to see 1, 3, and 5. Matching the side yard setback with the accessory building, very uncommon. Not saying it doesn't happen, but it's not as common. So 5 and 3 are probably the predominant ordinance numbers. 1 foot has been in ordinances, probably still in ordinances, was our county ordinance, and the county ordinance is replicated throughout the state. And a lot of people have changed to the 3-foot simply because of the water drainage off the roof. So 3 and 5 are your standards.
So going with the theory of perfect legislation, this is not perfect, but would you can say professionally, this is better than what we have now, allows more flexibility, or is this all value judgment? You know I'm going to do that to you, Corey. I'm not going to let you squirm
You're
away
not
from
gonna
that.
screw me. I'm going to give a prominence of 40%, this is better, but 60% is value judgment.
That's a lot to base a vote on, 60% value judgment.
Yeah.
Because to your point, Robin, it's like, could you table it and look for more? You could. Is there somebody waiting to build something right now that's going to fit this ordinance as it's drafted? I don't know. We've heard kind of tonight, probably not exactly ideal for the build conditions, but the question is, do you wait for 100% perfect legislation, or do you move forward with something that's 40% professionally rated as better and 60% value judgment than what you have now?
One of the things that I mentioned before, and I would still like to see, is something that if neighbors agreed on something less restrictive in writing, that you could go down to a 1 foot. Now, you create something that then saddles future property owners with that thing, or that less stringent provision. But it was up and it was there when they bought, and if you don't like it, don't buy it.
Well, I think the problem, Bill, you're going to run into is that would be arbitrary, because my neighbor may be an excellent cook and bribe me properly, but the guy 4 houses down the street does not like their neighbor and wants to make sure that their homeowner experience is awful, so they're not going to let them do anything, but they're going to point down the street and say, look what just happened. I think that would be where you run into problems.
I hear you, and it is a problem, but
And even in some, not necessarily in the zoning arena, but some of those sort of, if your neighbor agrees, have been struck down by the courts for that very reason, that they're arbitrary. It depends on who you live next to, not how you're zoned, and they provide inequitable regulations. So I would probably recommend not adding something like that.
okay.
But if you'd run legislation through that accessory buildings are protected like agricultural uses, you could probably do something like that. That was a tongue-in-cheek. Agricultural
Too soon, Corey, too soon.
Agricultural is protected under state law, and once you have an agricultural protection, there's no recourse adjacent property owners can take on you.
What about, there's no way to put it to where they can go through the Board of Adjustments so that if it was a hardship and didn't affect the other?
You could in theory, but you place the Board of Adjustment in a really precarious place because there's unclarity to them now. Because what are the factors that you're going to say creates a hardship for a property that you already fully enjoy with a house, a swimming pool, and you got your sports court, and because I built all those things, I can't quite fit my accessory building to meet the setback. So I have a hardship. That's a crazy example, but that's what you're putting
I was just
forward.
trying to figure out whose house you were talking about.
Isn't that yours, George?
No. Well,
I mean, if you were able to find set parameters that defined it well, Lisa's probably not going to be happy about it because that's finding what we call an exception to the rule, and granting exceptions is a risky business. But in theory, if you could find an exacting reason to give the board adjustment guidance when and where a hardship occurs and when there's undue burden, and I think that's where the difficulty is.
Well, I think on merit with what the planning commission, I mean, we don't have any dissenting votes. Everyone was present.
That's because the dissenting votes were the ones that caused the previous ordinance, and that was the the yelling and the field trips and the look how it's
Right.
blocking everything that I used to be able to see, and shading my yard so I can't grow anything and all of that. So the people who are here today are the ones who benefit from the building, not the ones who will be injured by the building.
Okay.
So,
Fair enough. So I would say just to move along the debate or to figure out where we stand, I'm just going to make a motion that we adopt ordinance 2019-12
Okay, so
as is.
as redlined.
So do I have a second to that motion?
I will second that motion, although after seconding it, I will say I'm not sure I will vote for it. I think it makes sense. I think I could think about this for the next 3 weeks and talk to neighbors, and I'd still be in the same place 3 weeks from now.
So we have a motion and a second. Do you have further discussion before we take a vote on the motion?
It's painful.
I agree, it is painful. The problem is we are not going to be able to satisfy everyone on this. That's why I was trying to nail down Corey to something more than 40-60. I was hoping more for like a 60-40 on the value judgment portion, but I struggle with it because the peaceful coexistence of neighbors. I had neighbors that are fantastic. I have new neighbors. Are they going to be fantastic? I don't know. They're new. They don't know me. I don't know them. You know, they own pets. I don't. There's all these little things you can now nitpick at the person next to you. I don't know that necessarily we can solve this for all cases for all people, but this seems to me to give a little bit more flexibility and allow people to use their property a little bit more efficiently than they can as it's currently stated.
Sure.
It's better than what it was. There's any, in my mind, there's any question.
Well, and that's my problem
The
is,
question is there more room to improve it without seriously damaging the people who don't want the two-story thing looking into their bedroom windows? And I don't know.
I feel like I would vote for it because it's better than what we have. Because if you don't vote for it, it's not going to be bringing it back to us. It's not, I mean, then it's going to stay what it is. So this is better than what we have, but yet, I wish we could get something better.
I'd almost like to do a field trip and just go out and measure some, I don't know.
Well,
It doesn't help to measure mine.
While I
for many reasons.
while I sympathize with that, I mean, we've got some other more sticky issues coming with South Main Street, and I don't know that I think it makes sense, Stephanie. I appreciate what you're saying, but there's only so many hours.
Well, and there isn't anything that, because this is initiated by the council as applicant, there isn't anything once we finish this piece of legislation to have somebody as an applicant apply to change that yet again with their supporting material before the Planning Commission. We gave a pretty wide set of parameters to the Planning Commission, said, go have fun with that and come back with something. They did. They met the objective of what we gave them, but if there is I mean, we've had a little bit of specificity here tonight in terms of what somebody is trying to do. If there's an applicant that approaches the Planning Commission, they can add that clarity, because we could do field trips. I'm just not sure that we're going to be adding the clarity of a homeowner who has a specific requirement, like we've heard, well, I know nobody can build next to me. I don't know whether that's a hillside or what that situation might be, but that's concrete that the Planning Commission can chew on, because unfortunately, as a body, we're going to be a little bit nebulous about what we say, because we're trying to cover all cases. So I'm planning on voting for this, because I think this is a good starting point for the city as the applicant, for us to at least get to this point, and then we can strongly encourage individual applicants to see if they can push that a little bit more with the Planning Commission with a concrete example. Whereas I don't know we're going to get much further with being more concrete and be representative of everyone.
You may come on up to the pulpit.
already said that it was flexible between 400 and 500. So is there any way to like maybe make the 400 go to 500, 100 square feet? That's.
At the present time, we have a motion before us. I guess there could be a substitute motion after we vote on this motion to make it go to there. That's up to council. So council, you ready to vote? Not hearing it anymore, so we have a motion before us in a second, and we've had further discussion on it. So let's vote, start. Do you have a comment before we vote?
I'd rather see it at 500. Let's see where that goes. So I'll make a substitute motion that we.
So actually, it would just be an amendment to that motion, if you'd like.
Amendment to change the 400 demarcation to 500.
Do we have a second to that amended motion?
Yeah, for purpose of getting a vote, I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a second to that amended motion. So help me out, Lisa. Do we have to vote on the motion and the amended motion?
Yeah, so you vote on the amendment first, and then if that passes, you vote on the motion as amended. If it doesn't pass, you just vote on the original motion.
Okay.
As we're getting ready to vote, while I seconded Stephanie's motion, because I would cite that because that's what we originally sent the Planning Commission. Because of some of the friction we've had with the Planning Commission, while I am very sympathetic to it, I think I will probably vote against it because of the Planning Commission. But I think it's worth talking about.
So did you say, Lisa, clarify for me, we're voting on the amended motion first?
Yes, after the discussion and debate on the amendment, you vote on the amendment first.
Just wanted to clarify that for council. So we have a motion and a second on that amended motion to go to 500.
On the amendment.
On the amendment, okay. Everybody clear? Just start the vote, starting with Councilwoman Ivy to my right, going to the right.
Aye.
Nay.
This is really hard, you guys.
Oh, I don't know that it's going to get them to where they need to be. Aye.
It's going to be a historic moment for you, Mayor. It's a nay. So
Good to know.
you're deciding, yeah?
Tie goes to the mayor.
So I'll vote nay.
Okay.
So that motion fails 3-2. So we now have the original motion
Yes.
that we're voting on, starting with, is everybody clear on that motion?
Mm-hmm.
Starting with Councilman Ince.
Aye.
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 So that motion passes 4-0. Okay, thank you. Let's go to item number 5. It's a public hearing matter. Thank you for everyone that attended. We're losing our crowd now. This is a public hearing matter on renewal of the certificate of registration with DWR for urban deer control and updates to the urban deer control plan. Chief, did you have some discussion and comments for us on that?
I don't know, that was a lot of suspense. I don't know if I can,
You don't think you can match it?
yeah.
I don't know how many times that's happened, where the mayor's been the tiebreaker. Not often.
Just second time for me. So the other one wasn't as suspenseful.
So, regarding the deer control plan and the COR topic, I think we all can agree that the the original problems that we were addressing in 2015 are still there with large deer population. The efforts that we put forth in the last little over 2 years, we were only able to get 2 years and about 1 month out of the last COR. Really didn't have a lot of success as far as removing a lot of deer. It was less than 20 over that period of time for a variety of reasons. So so we're looking at again now to kind of re-up that COR to see if we can address that. And obviously we had a work session on this, and I was given some direction as far as bringing a plan to the council, and also the idea that rather than kind of dividing it up between the Parks Department and the Police Department, that the Police Department would take this on. So today I met with the DWR, representatives from the DWR. I also brought in Aaron Albiston and one of my officers who is also a very avid hunter and very well qualified in archery and other things. And the city manager was there. So we had a discussion on what would be more effective in dealing with the situation and trying to reach the goal that we're trying to accomplish here of kind of mitigating some of the problems that are going on with the deer. One of the issues that we, in our discussion and talking about what happened over the last 2+ years, has to do with some of the restraints that are put in place by law, the restraints by the tightness of some of the communities where the homes are close together, just the deer, how they respond. And so we talked about the ways to maybe address that. So we came up with a plan to go after that. I still want to use the archers in areas where that would be probably better applied, where it has been successful, which is more on the north end of the city where we have a little more open fields, and they can continue to do the hunting like they've done over there. I want to look at using a police officer, a couple of police officers that we designate, and looking at some of the areas that we have in the south end and doing a dispatching of deer in problem areas, utilizing possibly a frangible round in a shotgun. We do want to do some testing on some different types of rounds. We want to make sure that we're not over penetrating when we're doing that kind of stuff. So that's what basically the consensus was among all the parties that talked about this today, that this could be a better, a more effective way of dealing with the issues. Having a trained police officer who is also a hunter that passes the qualification courses and so forth, and it has already been well trained in target identification and background and all that stuff that we go through as a law enforcement officer. And plus it allows, using a law enforcement officer is really the only legal way to do it within those confined spaces using a firearm. So that's the direction that I want to take it. I'm hoping that we can be a little bit more effective that way. We're allowed, so if we sign the COR, it would begin the 1st of August and go till December 31st. They did say that they were looking at a possibility of opening it up again for a short period of time in the spring, which our people felt like that would be very helpful to do. The antlered deer would only be hunted from August 1st to October 31st, and we could only take 15 of those. So our limit would, over the 3-year period, would be 100 deer. And then on March 1st, we have to make a report to the state on what deer, what we were able to take and who did it on the date and location. So, and as far as the, Councilman McEwen talked about the possibility of using some of the individual citizens or the homeowners. I don't really have a problem if they're hunting on their own property and they pass the course, as long as it's a relatively safe area to do it, using the archery option.
Something with at least an 8-foot setback. That was for
And a
Corey. That was
firewall.
not- That was, I did have one question. I'm in support of a frangible round, but are you looking at a suppressed shotgun?
Well, we do not have a suppressed shotgun. That is an issue.
I would
sound?
highly recommend, and I would support that it would be, if we're gonna do it with a firearm, that we use a suppressed shotgun.
Yeah,
I know they're
that-
expensive, but
I'll look into the cost on those for sure. That's my one biggest concern about it, is the sound, for sure.
Could you borrow one?
they're kind of unique items, and not a lot of people suppress them, but
Yeah, I'd have to look into that.
if we had that, then we could probably avoid a secondary call after our officer takes
Right.
care of the first problem.
Right. We have in the past, on multiple occasions, dispatched a deer using a handgun, a shotgun, an AR-15 within, close proximity to residential areas. And it's kind of interesting to me that it seems like no one ever calls. I don't get that. We've done it all hours of the day and night, and no one ever calls. It's just strange to me. But if we're doing, those are kind of sparse, few and far between. If we're doing more, maybe shooting 2 or more deer on one piece of property in one night, I would think that we would probably be getting calls.
Can you use a stun gun on deer?
No, no, that would not be effective at all. So the question was raised. I did hear this question about using a taser. When you say stun gun, you're basically referring to an
I'm
electronic,
not sure the technicalities, yeah.
yeah, device. So the taser only affects the deer while it's activated. Once it stops sending the electronic or the electrical shock, all effects of that taser ends. And so we have for example, on our tasers that the officers carry, there's only a 5-second duration on that. And you have to make, with a deer, you could potentially strike the deer with your taser and put it down on the ground, but you're only looking about 5 seconds that might be on the ground. And as soon as that taser stops going, you're going to have a really mad deer that's going to be damaging people if they're trying to get anywhere close to it. So I don't see that as a viable option.
Okay, I didn't remember that ever being mentioned, and I was curious.
Yeah. Plus, you'd have to get within 21 feet of them. From here to the other podium over there, which would be kind of difficult to get that close on some of them.
Does DWR acknowledge to any degree that they are a major portion of the problem?
Well, we didn't discuss that with them today. We did discuss some of the limitations that we have, and basically we were told that that's the way it is, that's the law, and we need to deal with it. Do you have a specific issue that you're thinking about as far as they're part of the problem?
No, just the restrictions are so severe that it has created the problem over the last 20 to 30 years. It's significantly worse than it was when I moved here 30 years ago. And what they are willing to do as far as cleanup and control reduces over time, and yet we can only take 100. We've probably grown the population more than 100 in town over the 3 years of the last COR.
Our hope is that we can get the deer to move out by putting pressure on them. by showing them that now there's a predator in town, which would be our hunters. And the hope is that by taking, as many as we can take, whatever that number is, hopefully more than the last 3 years, a lot more.
But your limit's 100.
But but the hope is that we can basically send them a message. You're not welcome here anymore. And deer behavior, I'm told by the hunters, is that once they realize that it's not safe there anymore, that there's a predator here, they're going to leave. Now they might come back. Then you got to maintain it, so you got to keep that maintenance going. But that's what was discussed today, is that if we can at least put some pressure on these deer in some of these areas where they haven't had pressure, there's a good chance they're going to take off and go somewhere else.
And several years ago, this was not a problem. I mean, growing up here, you never seen a deer in town. So this is seems like you'd have seen more then than you do now, but I was...
What's the fruit tree rose bush ratio now? I mean, is it just growth of the community, or?
I don't know if people have built up in there, so they've moved down. I don't know, but I can tell you that I was married before I ever seen a deer down in town.
Interesting.
Do you remember seeing deer in town as a kid?
During my, I grew up on the other side of the tracks. But when I started here, so I do know that during the 80s,
Right, that's about when it started.
we had a lot of deer that were getting hit by cars. I was going almost every shift shooting a deer. I got so sick and tired of shooting deer, I stopped hunting basically because I was just tired of it. So I know that there was a period of time there in the 80s that it was quite bad, and then it got better. So maybe the cars were the predators, and they moved them out.
Bring them back.
Yeah.
Cars are less substantial than they used to be.
Good point.
Any further questions for the chief right now before we do the public hearing on this? Or Chief, did you have more? I don't want
No,
to
I
cut you off.
don't believe so.
Okay. This is a public hearing matter, so we will open this up to a public hearing. This is a public hearing for the renewal certificate of registration with DWR for urban deer control and updates to the urban deer control plan. So the public hearing is now open for any member of the public who would like to come forth. If no public comments, we will close the public hearing, and we will go back to and ask if there's any further discussion or questions. If not, then we will look for a motion on this issue.
I move that we renew the certificate of registration with the Division of Wildlife Resources for urban deer control.
Second.
We have a motion to second. It's a roll call vote, so we'll start with Councilman Entz to my far right, going to the right.
Aye.
Nay.
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 3-1. Thank you, Chief. And thank you, Council. Item number 6 on our business is municipal code amendments, archery exceptions. This and our City Attorney Lisa Romney will discuss this.
Yeah, so in conjunction with the adoption of the new urban deer control plan, as well as our existing one, we allow lethal methods to be used for taking deer to include firearms as well as archery. And staff is just recommending an amendment to our code to allow an exception to use archery if you're part of the urban deer control plan and you've been an approved participant in that. So we're just recommending approval of ordinance 2019-13 to add this exception for the use of archery.
I would motion that we approve ordinance 2019-13.
Second.
A motion is second. Any further discussion? If not, we'll take a roll call vote starting to my left. Councilman Meekum. Going to the right.
Nay.
You can go, that's fine.
Oh.
To my right.
Aye.
Aye.
That motion passes 3-1. Thank you. Item number 7 on our agenda. This is a municipal code amendment related to emergency interim successors. And this is something that Lisa Romney once again has drafted. Lisa, you want to tell us a little more about this besides what we have in our packet?
Yes, our police chief brought this to my attention. Every July, we're required to notify the State Emergency Management Department of our emergency interim succession plan. And so we have an emergency management plan. I'm not sure it addresses it specifically, but it's talking about this line of succession. So since we have to report this every year, I thought it would be helpful to actually just put it in our ordinances so everybody can find it. Whoever's in charge of it next year, we always know where it is. Or if you want to make any changes, we can certainly do that. Not everybody has access to our emergency management plan, and it's not online. So that's why I'm recommending a code amendment. I think it's a simple item. This is within your discretion. The state code merely requires that we provide this line of succession. And if we don't, there's a default that says it should be the chief executive officer, which would be the mayor, the deputy chief executive officer, which in my opinion would be the mayor pro tem, and then it is the chair of the legislative body, which would then again be the mayor, and then the police chief. So we are recommending that the line of succession in an emergency would be the mayor pro tem, the chief of police, and then the city manager. The definitions are very strict under the ordinance of what's defined as absent, what's defined as a disaster. So basically, it has to be a disaster that interrupts the normal operation of government that this would kick in. So if you have any questions or issues, we're recommending approval of Ordinance 2019-11, adopting a new provision in our city ordinance for emergency interim successors.
Any questions for Lisa on that one?
I guess, since I'm maybe, at least of the body, most familiar with the emergency plan, since the chief of police is our emergency manager, I wonder that we don't go mayor, chief of police, mayor pro tem, city manager.
And I believe that this is for government, so he will be very busy in charge of, as being the emergency manager, but this is continuing the actual government. So if that makes any difference to you, but you could certainly change the order if you'd like.
Okay.
You look like you want to say something.
Chief, you're welcome.
Well, I was going to say that this is, again, just during a disaster. And it's mainly for the operation of government to continue and to fulfill the role of basically what the mayor, the authority the mayor would have during a disaster. So declaration of disaster, evacuation, those things that are outlined by code that the mayor has authority to do, but in his absence, then it would go to, under this proposal would go to mayor pro tem, which I think is the appropriate thing to do. Keep it within the political subdivision, which chances are one of you are going to be around, you know, hopefully.
If it's bad enough it's gotten to me, we've got bigger problems.
And then to the chief of police and city manager. And then what happens is that as soon as the next person up in that hierarchy it becomes available, then it goes right back to that person, and so on, right back up to the top.
So does it have to be a federally declared disaster?
Not federally, no. Locally declared. Doesn't have to be federally.
Okay.
This is one of those ordinances you hope you never have to figure out how it works in practice, right?
It is, yeah, it really is. When I saw it on the agenda, I thought, I hope that's what it is. But it's good that we get some order. So we have a motion on it?
I would recommend that we approve ordinance 2019-11 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Let's do a roll call vote, starting with my far left with Council when we make them.
Aye.
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 And that motion passes 4-0. Thank you. And
Mayor, I just want to thank the chief for bringing that to our attention, and I think this is a good way to handle it.
Chief?
Chief, I'll get with you tomorrow. I've got a recommendation for you.
Okay.
For the deer.
All right, thanks.
Hey, Chief,
Yes.
before you leave, do you need any help on what's going on tomorrow night and Thursday? You've done it for so many years, you probably got it under
We're
control.
good.
But
Yeah, Alan Ackerson's been working on it. He's put a lot of hours and a lot of time into planning, but we've done this, I mean, this is my 37th time doing it. So we've got it down, and we're good.
Just don't have me ride.
Say what?
Just don't have me ride.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so I think we're good, but thanks, Mayor. Yeah.
all right, Chief. I just know that you told me you have to pretty much have everybody on duty, and so
Right.
However we can help you, I just wanted to see.
Yeah, we have all of our officers will be on duty. We're all meeting at 5:30 in the morning for a pre-brief, and a breakfast, and then we go to work from there. All the assignments have been made, all the positions have been filled, and typically something happens and we have to do something on the fly, but we got that down. We're good.
Okay. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Thank your officers for us.
Yes.
You're great. We appreciate it.
See you tomorrow.
All right, item number 8 on our agenda is Planning Commission report. Mackenzie?
Just a review of what happened on the June 26th Planning Commission meeting. I was just making sure we didn't actually talk about setbacks the last time. So we met with the Landmarks Commission at 6 o'clock before the regular meeting to get their input on South Main Street corridor, because part of that connects to the Dual Creek Historic District. So that was a really helpful discussion with them. The South Davis Metro Fire District Station 83 received their final site plan approval. And then there was a really good discussion about South Main Street planning, just initially going over a timeline of what to talk about and when to talk about it, set for the rest of the year. And then the last thing, we went over Chapter 10, property line adjustments with Lisa and our ordinance rewrite. Thank you.
That was quick. Thank you, Mackenzie. Appreciate it. All right. Item number 9 is the mayor's report. Corey, I listened to you. Come on. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
He was queuing it up on YouTube, I saw. Watch it on the way home.
You're good, Corey. I don't want to say it's not exciting because I want people to go to sleep. It's exciting. No, you can leave at any time. Thank you. In the last 2 weeks since the last meeting, we've had a foundation meeting, and we had a good discussion on that. The foundation is continued to work hard and is an item that they took on, much to my appreciation. I didn't twist their arms, was raising some funds for the Mayor's Initiative on Wellness, the Centerville Cares. So that's taken place, and we'll be trying to parlay that money into receiving some matching funds from the state. I actually attended the Centerpoint Theater Board meeting last Thursday evening, and they were very grateful for all that had been done on the gala, and how that helped their cause. I think we have a good board down there, and we got a good executive, a good director down there. And I hope we can keep them in place for a while, because so they can keep paying that rent to us, and other reasons as well too. And then Councilman Entz and our chiefs did a very good presentation on wildfires. And Bill, I don't want to take your your impact here at all, if you want to talk about how you felt about that. But I thought it was very good. And we had probably 40 people,
Yeah.
I would guess, from all areas of the city. I did notice there was one area that was missing. A little disappointed because that was my area of the city. And so I have some discussions to be held with some leaders out there. But overall, it was very well attended, some great questions asked. One thing our fire chief mentioned is he likes access to our foothills because we don't have really structures above the fire road so they can get to them. Obviously their main thrust is to to protect the residents. And then, of course, the feds and the state come in as the fire climbs up the hill to take care of that part of it. But that was very good, and I don't know whose idea that was, Councilman Ince, but it was a very good idea. And I think that the people were left with some fire burning in their heart to make we take care of it and to educate people within their districts. We have had a nice meeting today, Councilman Ince and I, over with the manager at Dick's, and that was part of what the foundation wanted to do, and meeting with them. And then as far as were you going to discuss, Brant, the chief's response on something about a 911 celebration? Was that part of you?
I put that in the weekly update, just that the chief is trying to do something on that day, hopefully regardless of construction, where the status is, he would like to do something. So he's already planning something. So at this time, I think he's working on anything, but I just told the chief, hey, if you need anything from us, help planning, whatever, let us know. So I didn't want to force him saying, hey, we got ideas or whatever it might be. I know that the chief's going to go all out if he can.
And I know that was in your report. I just wanted to say that let them know as well too. And I talked with the chief that's on his mind, and he wants to do something. Then the other thing, I got it to you kind of late, but I did submit to you 3 or 4 hours before this meeting one name for Landmarks Commission, and upon doing this, we will have our commissions full again, except we did have a planning commission member that was transferred to Russia, so I do have an appointee there that I've talked with a couple people, but they hasn't worked with their schedules or they haven't fit. So I submit to you the name of Mason Kerr for the Landmarks Commission. Have a motion on that, or?
I didn't get a chance to look at the thing from you.
And I delayed on that. I can hold off if you guys want to look at it further and present another time. I just it hit me. I talked with Mason about 3 weeks ago. So.
And is he good with being on the Landmarks Commission? Is that
a
focus that he's okay with?
Yep.
I read the materials provided. He seems very qualified for anything we want to have him do.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds good then.
So do we have a motion to support that appointment?
I would make such a motion.
I'll second the advice and consent.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. I guess the last thing I'd say is we all know what is coming up tomorrow night and Thursday morning, and I hope that you're excited about it and the opportunity to recognize our independence and our freedom, and I'm excited to be here all with you as well too. We just heard from the chief, so that was good news to hear as well too. So that's what I have on the mayor's report. So city manager's report, unless there's any questions for me. Was it worth it?
Wait, Corey, I'm not done yet.
Yeah, that related to you. Brent?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have 2 items. I'm really excited. I've met with Kim and Brian over the last couple of days, the chairs of our 4th of July committee. I'm really excited to see what they have planned. They're entertainers, so I'm really anxious to see. So I'm going to hang out for the 4th of July, see how the celebration goes. I'm really excited to be a part of that. And BHI, the construction for Island View Park, will commence on Monday, July 8th. So that'll get started. So
Can I just say, just because little things get to me, that the private property no trespassing on the fence line of the public park just kind of rubs me the wrong way every time I go by it.
So maybe go with the under construction,
Under
stay out.
construction, maybe, but
Okay.
that private property kind of made me go,
That's a fair
That's funny.
point. I'll make that. I'll see what I can do with that. But other than that, I don't have anything further this time, unless there's any questions for me.
So I drove I drove Main Street specifically today in anticipation of Thursday. And I guess I've got a couple of questions. We've got a whole lot of cones in different places. Are they planning to pick those up, do we know? Or are they there and staged and they're going to be using them next week, and so they're just there? There are sections that are very smooth, but it looks like haven't been done yet, and is that a proper and a correct interpretation?
So when I spoke to Randy and Kevin yesterday about the status, because they've been attending the weekly meetings, as far as I know, the cones and construction equipment will be removed, and because I didn't want it to be not aesthetically pleasing, right? You don't want to go there and think you're in a construction site. So I don't know if they're done yet, but we do have a meeting tomorrow morning at 10 that I'm going to bring that up. The other item is they're actually grinding. So right now they're making it smooth. They just can't do that final overlay until after the parade. So if you drive down, it looks like there's a section that looks like it's unpaved. It's been grinded down. It's flat. And so that's what happens. Then they'll have another overlay that goes over top of that. Okay. But they have to wait till after the parade for that. But I'm excited they got all 3 sections done. I was a little worried about that seam between the two. I'm like, this is rough. Crazy. But man, they knocked out that last section, the middle section, in no time.
Yeah, they really did.
So
the one problem that we have is that the school district has chosen to do the parking lot at Jenny P. Stewart this week. And it is all completely torn to pieces. It's a mess. And that's normally a heavily used area for the parade. And anything we can do about it, it's their property. It's unfortunate.
You have to cut out that parking on the south side. And sitting, there's probably about 3/4 of the land still available, assuming they hadn't torn up any more since 9 o'clock this morning, but we haven't been by since then.
Well, I'm sure UDOT will. I'm sure they'll pick up their cones, because if they don't, they're going to be finding them all over the place with the parade route. It's just the nature of kids. So I hope they pick them up.
No, you're right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brent. Item number 11, the minutes review and acceptance for the June 18th, 2019 work session minutes and the June 18th, 2019 city council minutes. Do we have any adjustments or changes to those minutes?
Motion to accept the minutes as recorded.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the minutes. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Item number 12, closed meeting. Do we have any motion to go into a closed meeting, or?
I'll make the motion that we adjourn the city council to convene a closed meeting to discuss character and competency of individuals provided by state law with no intent to return to the city council.
We have a motion do we have a second on that?
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All righty. Then if no intent to return, then city council is adjourned.
At 9:07.